Welcome back, guys. May 24th, 2020. Happy Memorial Day weekend to everyone. Hope everyone's enjoying this holiday weekend. Very crazy time in the baseball industry and the sports world this week. And a lot of things have happened this week. We have Major League Baseball discussing a return to play option. We have two fairly storied college baseball programs in Division I baseball discontinuing their programs this week. We'll discuss that shortly. And we have, obviously, the ever-looming contraction of probably 42 to 45 minor league baseball programs and affiliate programs. Independent leagues are still struggling to find out whether or not they're going to be able to play. Those who are involved are trying to figure that out. And it's important to us at Rax Hacks and Hacks Facts here that we stress a very important point to you guys out there. Whenever this does end, and whenever we have the opportunity to go back out and gather and assemble, support your minor league baseball teams. Support your independent league baseball teams. And we're not scientists here. We're not doctors. We don't pretend to be. We understand that there's something bigger going on here. But understand that when 42 to 45 minor league affiliates are contracted, and that's going to happen, that doesn't just change the reality for the players. And it does. It limits job opportunities. But many people that we've brought on here, it's profound that they say that they were first influenced by going to a minor league baseball game, going to a professional baseball game. Not necessarily a major league game. We know that product's not going to go anywhere. But that idea that you can replace the in-game experience or the human experience with streaming or screens, that you can replace going to a live event with sitting in your couch at home and watching something on a screen. Most of us who are involved in baseball, who play at a high level, we can recall the experiences we had as children, being there and smelling the grass and getting up close to players and watching the game, hearing the crack of the bat, the smells you get from the ballpark, all these really visceral, unique, experiential things. Minor league baseball is especially important because you have accessibility to these players. They're up close to you. Physically, you're closer to them. You can talk to them. Many of these players, especially in independent baseball as well, they have vested interests in the community. They participate in community initiatives. They do camps, clinics. They end up opening academies. They train players. They teach players. They have a love for the game, and they're willing to impart that on players. And that's what we stand for here at Rax Hacks. And I want to add one more thing. It's very important that you understand out there that this isn't just localized to baseball. We understand that it's harder and harder for people in this environment to have small music gigs. Here on the Jersey Shore, there's some famous clubs in Asbury Park and other places that are closing. And who will end up suffering from these closures? It's you. It's the consumer. It's the fan. It's those that want to take their, not necessarily to music gigs, but with small children, it's you being able to take your family of four to a minor league baseball game and spend $100 and have a great memory that will last forever with you and your kids. Or young people that want to go and watch live music for not pay a huge cover and sit in a stadium, but being able to get up close to the performers and experience the sound and experience the quality of what's going on around you. And that's the human experience. We don't know how things are going to shake out. We don't know what's going to happen, but we will say this: support your local artists, support your local professional baseball players and athletes from other sports. And buying local and supporting local, it isn't just an empty catchphrase. It's truly a process that can help you, recycle and re-add back into your community. And when you do that, you and your families and your children, everybody gains. Rax Hacks and the Hacks Facts podcast, we are made possible through the contributions from American Batsmith. American Batsmith, great wood bat company, professionally crafted, professionally handmade wood bats out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Jacob Huff does a great job out there. Again, we keep stressing that baseball is going to be back at some point, and no better way to train hand-eye coordination, strength, mechanical aspects than using a wood bat, a quality wood bat. Jacob does a really good job out there. Check them out at www.americanbatsmith.com. American Batsmith, be distinct. We're all about being distinct here at Rax Hacks. And it's brought to you by Rax Hacks Remote Training. We have no doubt that baseball players will prevail. They will continue to train. They will be resilient. That's what playing baseball, that's what playing a professional sport or any sport is all about, is building resilience and building discipline. With Rax Hacks, with our remote training programs, we're able to aggregate video, collect video, put together an individualized program for each player, whether they're in person with us, or if you're in the remote training program, you can be anywhere in the country. You can be anywhere in the world. We can help you guys build a better swing, build a better training regimen through our aggregate video technology. And that's not to say we're replacing the human element, because at Rax Hacks, we are data-driven, but we are human-centered. And we will always put the human element and the human experience first. Check us out at our social media pages, RAX_HAX, and give us a DM or reach out to us if you're interested in learning more about our programs. We have a great guest today, John Harris, very good buddy of mine, very well-traveled, very legitimate baseball guy. We'll go into his background, give you guys some more info, but John, welcome onto the show. It's great to have you here. For those of you following along at home, John is no stranger to good baseball. John was a 2-time Johnny Bench Award watch list at Gardner-Webb University in Boiling Springs, North Carolina. It's very close to South Carolina. It's kind of hard to tell whether you're in South Carolina or North Carolina there, for those of you who played there. 3-time starter at Gardner-Webb, and you were a preseason All-Big South catcher in 2013, an All-Big South catcher in 2012. You were voted the Big South's best defensive catcher by College Baseball Insider in 2013. That's a legitimate baseball conference. I mean,
that was my favorite because that was voted on by all the other coaches.
That's big time. So that's we're talking about Campbell, High Point, Coastal Carolina, Winthrop, Radford, Liberty. These are good. I don't know. The Big South, the conferences keep changing and realigning. However, that's an important, legitimate baseball conference that's produced national champions, and he was voted the finest defensive catcher in the league. You signed a professional contract after that. You played in, was it the United Baseball League down in Texas?
Yeah, in Texas. It was, at the time, it was only teams in Texas, and they dissolved after that season, so it was unfortunate for that league. Because I just actually, looking back, I was just interested in seeing what happened to the Fort Worth Caps, because there was talk about in Fort Worth, and you were talking about this in your monologue earlier, just, supporting local small baseball. And I found it devastating to believe that ever since 2014, the Fort Worth Cats are no longer. There's a historical group that's trying to save the facility, because that facility has housed people like Ted Williams, all the greats that have come through their system through minor league baseball in the past. And it was just one of those things where they didn't do any sort of maintenance on that. And it was just unfortunate to see. But going back on my accolades, I think the fun part about it was, fast forward, you talked about the defensive catcher award. Fast forward a couple of years, I was coaching at Reinhardt my first year, and I got to meet Gary Gilmore for the first time outside of competition. And I introduced myself. I said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me. My name's John Harris. I caught for Gardner-Webb between the years of 2009 and 2013. And he just looks at me and he goes, "I know who you are. You made me mad. You made me mad a lot. Right. I don't like playing against you, but I appreciate, so it was like really funny as far as, rekindling some non-competitive, competitive urges between, a former coach that I played against and learning the respect level of different players. Because I had the same, that same year that I was the defensive catcher of the year, they had 2 awards for catchers of the year. They had best arm and best defensive. Trey Wimmer from Liberty was the one that got the best arm. And I was like, all right, no contest. That dude's got a hose. But it was nice to say all around defensive. If we take the arm out of the equation, it was like, okay, well, how many attributes does that count for? Awesome. I loved it. But that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. and you ended up signing a contract too with Evansville, but obviously well traveled in independent baseball. And then you mentioned coaching at Reinhardt. John obviously has experienced baseball on both sides. He's been a very good, successful collegiate baseball coach, also a private instructor, involved with college recruiting, and he played at a very high level. He coached at Reinhardt University, an NAIA school in Waleska, Georgia, the Atlanta area, where John is from. And in 2018, Reinhardt, I followed this along very closely, made a very, very memorable, great run to the NAIA World Series in Idaho. They play that up at Lewis and Clark State's field. For baseball guys, the NAIA, I mean, that's a legit, getting to the World Series in Idaho is in a different way. It's the same connotation as getting to Omaha. It's a prestigious, well-respected achievement. And, I think Reinhardt had some middling years prior to you getting there, and they really took off and had an excellent year in 18. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Also had some experience coaching at Blackburn College, which was a Division III school, I believe, in Illinois in 14 and 15. You coached high school ball in the Atlanta area at Evans High School. And just guy is a wealth of wisdom on preparation, mentality. He's an excellent defensive catching instructor, knows the games, the ins and outs from playing behind the plate, as well as being a good hitter. And we'll talk too about how you use some of that information to be an excellent pitching coach at the collegiate level. Do you remember how we met? That's an interesting story in and of itself. Back in my Marist days, it's funny because your wife's actually from up in the Marist area, if I'm not mistaken, right?
She's from Hopewell Junction, and I'd kind of bounced around different places. When I got up there, I think it was in the summer of 2015, just before we got married. Fall 14, spring 15, summer 15, and then I had bounced around to different locations, different like makeshift jobs, and I even spent a time working at Dick's for a little bit, and that was terrible. But ultimately, I found myself working for extra innings and Wappingers, and I was like, okay, it's a lot of talent here. And it was just nice to kind of bring my Southern vibe, my West Coast roots with my Southern vibes up into the Northeast, and try and see how many minds can we change, right? Or how many minds can we mold to a correct location? Because you get all the body movements, whatever, and then nothing changes with your mind. Last time I checked, your mind's telling your body what to do. So I was like, okay, well, here are these guys. And I think it was you and Johnny Boy.
You and Brucker, that's right.
Me and Brucker. And I'm like, hey, here are these guys. Let's go talk. Let's just see what these guys are up to. And sure enough, I think Rucker was hitting at the point because, he's a lefty hitter and I'm a lefty hitter. And I was like, okay, here's this pretty smooth lefty swing. Let's just start asking questions and see what we get out of them.
Right. And it's interesting we met because we had a facility up at Marist, but our facility was a racquetball court to hit in about, 15 feet long. So that combined with, Johnny and our desire to get some compensation as hitting coaches during our college days, because, money's tight and it's nice to be able to give back and make a little money doing that. So ultimately we found this facility down there, and Johnny Harris, and ended up, talking to him and kind of clicking, because you have this different way of talking about the game. I think it's important, because up to that point, I had never heard anyone talk like you about hitting, about mentally preparing. And I something that stuck out to me was how you were willing to bring this kind of calm intensity. I'd call it a calm intensity, because anyone that knows you knows that you're not a loosey-goosey, laid-back kind of guy. But the intensity, for me, it was very important at that point in my career, because I was this new, Northeastern New Jersey, like balls to the wall. You got to go hard. You got to have type of hitter. And you do hit a level as a baseball player where that doesn't work at a certain point, because you face failure, you struggle. We talk about it every time on this show. And I think you understand what I mean when I say this calm intensity. What what instilled that in you? Where does that mindset, that quiet intensity, where does that come from?
That came from being, and I think I talked about this a little bit of when we first started hitting together and talking about things, is that my somewhat calm intensity when it comes to hitting came from my over aggressive, I've got to do this in these 3-hour sessions through high school and the first 2 years of college.
Okay.
It comes from, and I'm going to name drop because, hopefully somewhere, maybe they're listening or they have players that listen.
Please.
You get guys in my first year at Gardner-Webb were fifth-year seniors that I learned a lot from. Our starting 9 through the whole year, except for one guy, which was our catcher, which is the Ty Bowles, who was a great friend of mine. I think he's one of the cross-checkers I think he's the Cardinals cross-checker now in the Southeast.
Okay.
And Ty was a great wealth of knowledge, but at the same time, you have guys like Jonathan Ahern and Jamal Kennard, and Jamal never played with me, but Jamal was always coming back and forth, and they were so calm in their process. And I was just this gung-ho 19, 18-year-old kid that was so like, I have to hit 100 balls. I have to hit 100 balls. And then they started realizing, they're like, challenge yourself in a setting where you dictate your mindset so that when you have to draw back to that, it's at a non-overly aggressive level to where you can actually sustain some confidence, some mental capacity, and be able to make your body do what you want to do. Now, I'm talking about they're players, right? And we had 3 coaches on staff. We had 2 guys that were major hitting coaches. We had Kent Cox, who was great. Kent Cox was, I think in his heyday, he was at Campbell University. He was our hitting coach and one of our recruiting coordinators. And his claim to fame was he was the toughest guy to strike out in like 1987 or 1989, the last year he played. Guy struck out 5 times all year.
Okay.
Like, we're talking some serious bat handling ability.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our hitting coach. But he had instilled in all of our old guys this process that he didn't have to teach. They were teaching for him. And I just kept thinking, like, I'm just spinning my wheels in the cage. I'm not going anywhere. What has to change? And I was like, okay, I just got to kind of chill out. And then, also the hitting coach I've had since I was in high school kept trying to get me in here. And his vibes were in. But as far as when I did work on my own, it was like I forgot about it. So, obviously Ted Wood's a big guy for me. Ted Wood's a guy that played in the Olympics. He played for the Giants. He's the left fielder for the Giants before a guy named Barry Bonds showed up.
Right.
So you can look up. He spent a lot of time in Asia playing. He's a big name in I think it's either Taiwan or I want to say it's the Taiwan league in Taiwan. He's
CPBL.
Yeah. 91 to 93, he was in Taiwan. But before that, 88 to 91, he was in the major leagues playing for the Giants, playing for the Expos. But he's a big vibe guy, right? We talk about vibe all the time.
Right.
It's like as soon as I leave the field, I'm this kind of angsty, excited guy. And then as soon as I get in the box, it's like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my element. There's just a little bit of difference. And it kind of plays out depending on what game you're playing with the opposing pitcher. Because sometimes you can get a little bit of a cat and mouse game going on where if you look excited, they'll overpitch you.
Right.
Or if you look calm, they'll there's just this, and we do the same way when we look at people and we go ahead and start a conversation. It's no different pitcher to hitter. Is that as soon as the guy walks in the box, there's this nonverbal communication starting, and you're trying to, work him in a certain way. Like that was why I talked to you a long time about your walk-up songs. If you're going to use your walk-up song and it pumps the pitcher up more than it pumps you up, change your song. Like that's the worst thing that can happen is a fighter into the ring and the guy you're about to whoop is more excited than you are because of the song you chose.
And it's funny you mentioned that because I've learned over the last 3-4 years is every time you come into an at bat, and maybe you're in a leverage situation where the reliever comes in, it's a way you can practice this. You can practice this where if the guy comes in, he wants to be the guy, and he's got whatever song is blasting. You learn how to actually channel that same energy that he's using for him, and you bring it back to you. And then all of a sudden, that intimidation thing doesn't really work. I love talk. The walkout song stuff's fascinating because you used to tell me about how you would play, certain metal songs, and you'd have like not like a drop, like a beat drop, but like a click where you pick a certain part of a song. And as you leave the on deck circle, you almost like exhale and the click happens and all of a sudden you're numb and you get to go into the at bat with a clean slate and a fresh mind. And I think it's important because a lot of guys use walkout songs for the wrong reasons.
Right. They try and do a crowd pleaser.
Yep.
And I'm all for it. Like, I'm a big David Ross fan. Like, I got his book. He's over here on the shelf behind me. But realistically, like, David Ross, to me, when he was a Brave, smartest guy ever. I never heard a walk-up song for David Ross. All I heard was playing the chop because he knew he's only going to play like once a week. Right? Now, smart guy. You're going to play once a week. You're going to be the guy that catches, whatever the day game after the night game. Brian's taking a day off. And I just thought it was fascinating because every time I watched him play, and especially on TV, like I would hear it on TV, and you'd see everybody get up and do the chop. Now, not necessarily a crowd pleaser, but for him, it's like, I want everybody excited that I'm here.
Right.
Because everywhere else I've been, it probably hasn't been exciting for me to be here. Except for then after Braves when he goes to the Cubs, and then after the Cubs when he goes to Red Sox, it's like he's a household name now. But for a long time, David Ross had been this nobody just hanging around. And then all of a sudden he gets to the Braves, he's like, click idea. Let's use the chop. Anytime I come into bat, just play the chop. I don't care. Just play the chop. I don't care if we're losing by 12. Play the chop. Because at some point you get a little bit of excitement. Yeah,
and you endear yourself to the fans, and you have that extra bit of support. But I'm going to go back to one thing, because you were talking a lot about the nonverbal communication. I think that's critical. To what extent do you think that being a catcher allowed you to tap into that, to observe that, and use that to your advantage? Because that's something that I find a lot of pitchers that even neglect. The good pitchers don't. Yeah. A lot of pitchers are just like, I don't want to think, I don't want to feel, I want to look at the sign and then execute, and that's fine. But the best catchers we've talked to, they're noticing everything. They notice if you move a half inch over in the box. They notice if you are standing taller. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I know you have a lot of experience.
I mean, first of all, go back to, I guess, kind of my East Cobb days of playing for Dennis Jordan. And Dennis Jordan, one of the most renowned Southeastern catching coaches around here, coaches for North Paulding. He'll be a Hall of Famer in the state of Georgia. There's no doubt about that for coaching. In the early 2000s, his mindset was a very strict, almost, militarian type, leader back there behind the plate. Mm-hmm. And at some point I kind of formulated that into a, I guess it was too aggressive for me at the time. So, over the course of from there on, I started learning and picking up skills of, well, how does that work for me? Because that's basically how everybody has to operate. It's like you can hear one thing, it works for a lot of people, doesn't necessarily work for you. Right. You're trying to somewhat, make Frankenstein of it. You're taking pieces of other dead ideas, and then you put dead ideas and formulate it into your own idea, and then boom, that sucker's alive. You can do that with catching. And for me, that was nice because as it went to nonverbal cues, that formulated into college. First year, I'm working with Jason Burke, and Jason Burke's now the head coach at Lander. Yep. And he was our pitching coach at Gardner-Webb my first couple of years. And he would always talk about nonverbal communication between me and him, so that he would then be able to relay to me what I could relay to a pitcher, all through nonverbals. Yeah. So that we had an understanding of what the guy's doing. And even if it didn't change necessarily our pitching, our system of what we were going to call on that at bat specifically, it was more so just to get everybody on the same page of, we know what's going on. And just to tweak that little bit of confidence back in our direction of, hey, here's the guy. He doesn't know what's coming. Either way, he's going to lose. But we all know something he doesn't. Yeah. And that was just something that kind of stuck. And then turned into me wanting to look for more. So I'd look for, size of, because everybody has their issues, right? I mean, every team has their own issues. And not to say that you want to use those, but they are usable to a degree. So Radford in 2011, and this is just a minor cue. We already knew that Radford going into the conference tournament had internal turmoil. Okay. In their team, and we'd seen them kind of chit chat back and forth. Okay. So during the tournament, we're at a situation where it's an elimination game, and I'm thinking in the third, fourth inning, I'm like, you know what? This is a great opportunity to open this up, give us an opportunity, and if I can, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that they hate each other. That's good. All right. So a nonverbal cue. You can't hear what they're saying, but you can tell by their body language that they just can't stand each other at this point. And sure enough, I hit a little doink single over the third baseman's head down the line, and right out of the gate, double. Like I'm already thinking. Best case scenario, I hit a double, we get rolling. Worst case scenario, I'm out by 5 feet and I get yelled at. I'm not mad about it, but somebody won't see what I'm talking about. So sure enough, guy lollygags to get it down the line. I'm booking the whole way. I slide in safely. The throw had like 18 hops.
Yeah.
Because the guy freaked out.
Yeah.
And I slide in safe. We have a 5-run inning. We beat them 5-3.
Yeah.
Like, now granted, after that inning, the entire dugout that was in the game comes off, and they literally fight the left fielder verbally, like in the dugout following that inning. Game was over in the 4th inning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just because I had, the nonverbal cues of saying, hey, here's a situation, maybe we take advantage of it. And I just thought, you know what, good opportunity. As I'm booking it, obviously at my 7-8 speed going around first base, that I noticed, number 2, all right, this is going to work.
Right.
It wasn't that I was waiting for something to happen. I'm like, oh, this is going to work. This is awesome.
Right.
And then even fast forward in 2015 or 14 when I'm playing in Texas, same thing happened, except for in the form of nonverbal cue, to where you get a kind of a guy that's, and I don't remember his name, but there was a catcher for Fort Worth that, was kind of this very gung-ho, made it to rookie ball and kind of had an entitled mindset. And so like I used that against him.
Yeah.
Wasn't that he was dumb or anything like that. I just took advantage of situations.
Right.
There's a time we're playing the World Series in the UBL, and I decided to throw down fake signals from second. Our hitters got no clue. We don't have a system. But I decide, you know what, I'm going to play the mind game with that catcher back there, because I know this is going to screw him. In his head, he's going to worry more about me than he worries about our guy hitting. I was on second base, led off with, I think it was a double. Same thing, like 3rd or 4th inning. And he calls time to go talk to the pitcher. And he doesn't go talk to the pitcher. He's yelling at me at second base for relaying signs.
Okay.
Now, my fake signs, I actually, like, the system I created in my head was actually correct. I called 4 accurate signs.
Okay.
So, like, in joking with myself that I was going to, mentally screw this guy over, shockingly, they were actually accurate. And so he comes out and yells at me. And I'm like, dude, they're fake signs. Like, our guy hitting in the box, go ask our guy hitting in the box. Like,
yeah,
just turn around, go ask him if we have signs to relay from second.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I don't know what the hell he's doing at second base because we don't have signs.
Yeah.
So sure enough, next pitch, fastball on a 3-2 count, whack.
Yeah.
We start rolling. The guy's, he's lost because there's the nonverbal game, there's the mental game, but then there's just those tiny little instances where they both work together.
Right. And
before you know it, you've got somebody worrying about something that has no existence being worried about, which is why I'll always tell kids, it's like, play the game that you're playing. Let's not play the opponent. Let's not play all the other external factors. Play the game, right? It's what you want to do. If you can play the game, it's going to be great. If you start playing other people, get you. Now you can do the opposite, right? And you, the person, can play the person on the side that, benefits you. But as far as like trying to attack that opponent all the time, sometimes it comes back to get you. You just want to play the game.
Yeah, the famous Augie Garrido quote is don't compete against the pitcher. You're competing against the baseball, regardless of where you're at, whether you're playing defense, offense, you're pitching, you're hitting. You're competing you're competing for control of the baseball, and it changes the mindset, because you could have guys that try to intimidate you mentally or emotionally, and that's kind of an armor there, because you can just always go back and rely on the baseball as your cue. But what I really like about what those are great stories, amazing. For one, you do have this ability as a catcher, in my opinion, where, okay, you have your mechanical proficiency, you have your pitch calling proficiency, but you're able to stand back and look at what's happening around you, and having the wherewithal of yes, picking up that nonverbal communication. But players today are often told, just stay in your lane, just focus on the execution. I'm the coach. I'm going to put the signs down. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to put the hit, and I'm going to do this and that. Well, if players were to just do that, they would lack this ability to control the mental game. And, everyone's in love with The Last Dance. They're talking about Michael Jordan. They're talking about how much of a psychopath he was at times. But it's being opportunistic.
Right.
And it's something that I think you touched on right there. Also, for what it's worth, you may have started something, because in 17, when we were playing Gardner Webb, I want to say every time there was a base hit to the outfield, I think we had like 4 or 5 assists that weekend, but they also, they took a bunch of extra bases on us because they were very, very persistent in, like, if I hit a ball and I see you take 3 to 4 lateral steps as an outfielder, I'm going to push you. I'm going to try it.
Oh, yeah.
And it does make you, we're doing our job as outfielders, but it does make you think about it. And for those that are listening, what happened when you pushed it? You ended up leading to a 5-run inning. That won you a ball game. But you notice that based on the chemistry and the body language. All of these things they're not physical tools.
Right.
They speak to your mental toughness.
Sure.
And
well, we were lucky at Gardner Webb, because in our and this is Rusty Strap's no longer there. He retired a couple years ago, and good for him. I think finally got some recognition I think he deserved. I don't think Gardner Webb treated him in his last couple of years the way that I would wanted him to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, that just means that I'm just not, if the Alumni Associations wants to call, asking for a favor, I'm probably going to say no, and I'm going to tie it back into, well, you didn't really do a whole lot for my skipper, so I'm not exactly excited about, funding that. Anyways, that's a whole different ballgame. But in our fall conditioning, though, he would play it out in our heads, because you can't touch a ball, you can't touch a bat, you can't do anything baseball related in those hours. Yeah. And so before a conditioning set, if we were doing base running as a conditioning, obviously we had no bases. We'd have cones that were bases. Otherwise, it's the NCAA could come by and say, "Oh, you guys are practicing." So we would play these out in our heads, and then run through the situation like as if we were seeing it play out in front of us. And one of the things that we did was always, double out of the box. Right. We're reading throws, but we're also reading feet. So when we did that played in constantly, because you're doing rep. Yes. And then by the time you get out of the game, you've already been programmed, hey, we're looking for throws or we're looking for feet. And so if the feet work, we were like, oh, we got it. Because there's no way this guy's going to make an accurate off-balance throw. And if he does, we have justifiability in the situation, right? It's like, okay, well, he made an absolute great Aaron Judge throw off balance, one-stop shot, boom, I'm right there, tagged, bang, bang, and I was out. Nobody's mad at that. What we're mad at is if we see lollygag, bad throw, bad feet, and all of a sudden we're not trying to take advantage of it. Right. And then on top of it, for the assist, like it plays out is that, Rusty Straps always had a rule. If a ball makes it to the outfield, you're trying for a double. It's just, we're not settling for singles. And then I think that was kind of one of those things my first couple of years, because Blake Lally had hung around for a little bit. Blake's managing, I think, a minor league team out west. And Blake was the doubles leader, I think, in, was it 2005? The year he got drafted, I think it was either 2005 or 2004. He was one of the doubles leaders in the nation. And that was always one of those things that stuck in with us is, we're not settling for singles. We're trying to lead the league. We're trying to lead the league in doubles. And we're trying to lead the nation in doubles. How do you do that? Sometimes you got to get it cheaply. Sometimes you get it to bounce off the wall and you get it nice and easy, stumble right into second standing up. So it was just one of those things that they kept hammering in us through visualization tool, in a sense where most people are just locked into, okay, let's do agilities. Let's do, some 40s. Let's do some 60s. Let's do some, conditioning that are non-baseball specific. And then all of a sudden you lose the ability to teach the mind's ability to play out something, which then as soon as you get in the game, it's second nature at that point. So that was really useful. And a lot of good coaches are doing that. I'm not saying that, that we're the only people doing it. A lot of good coaches are doing that, and they're taking advantage of those times where they're restricted on hours. Right. To still play the mental game. Right. Instead of like, oh, well, we can't hit, we can't throw, we can't do this. We can't practice. Like, that's not true. Like train the mind.
Absolutely.
So that was a big one for us.
It doesn't hurt that Gardner Webb may have had the umpire and crews in their pockets down in Boiling Springs, because I do recall a very important play where we had an outfielder diving for a ball at the end of a game in 17 down there that was called a trap. That was grossly miscalled. And then I think we had a guy get thrown. We threw a guy out at the plate that should have been a game-ending, series-clinching game event back in 17, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, a lot of skeptical calls down there, but it is.
Were those on the day that I was there, or was that the day after I was there?
No, no, it was the Sunday. It was a Sunday. No, we blew it.
Okay.
No, I remember that. We had the rain delay, right? You were
Yeah.
there, and then you came back, and then we
Yeah.
we had one taken away down there. But
Yeah.
Good place to play.
Send it on replay. That's the only thing I would have said. Just put it on replay.
I don't know if we have replay back. Yeah, I agree. I do remember too that they had remixed the Go Cubs Go song.
Don't even start. Don't even start.
Gardner Webb. I don't know if they still do, but they had a Go Dogs Go.
Oh yeah, it's
Cubs
terrible.
remix where the players each year sing the song and they play it on the loudspeaker after wins. And I remember looking around being like, we just had a win taken away from us. It was a Sunday. Their guys were all jacked up. We have a bus ride going back to D.C., and I'm sitting there. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Like, what is it I'm listening to?
Yeah, I felt bad too, because then when I watched Rusty's last game he managed in Boiling Springs, and he did a remix to oh gosh, what was that really famous song with Billy Ray Cyrus and that rap little Lil Nas or something?
Old Town Road remix.
So on his last game, they played his cover of Old Town Road, and it was like, I don't even want to say it. It was just something funny. I just think as a non-player, it was kind of funny. If I was his player, because I was still kind of uptight back then. I mean, I would have just been like, oh, this is such a joke. Why are we doing this? Come on, man. Like, you're such a nice guy. Don't do this with that song. Like, they're playing it over the loudspeaker too. They won. It was a good game, but I'm just sitting here like, oh man, like, oh, Coach Strap, like, come on, man.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
You're clearly very good at prioritizing relationships. And I think that had to have had a profound impact on the Reinhardt run to Lewiston back in 18. And you talk about all these things you're talking about, and I think Rusty did a great job at Gardner Webb with a lot of this, but incorporating the human element into your technical practice.
Right.
Did you do anything, for those that are listening, you've fulfilled a lot of different roles in your coaching career. I mean, at Reinhardt, you were a pitching coach.
Right. The first year, the second year I got put back as a hitting coach because the guy that came in to be the new head coach was a pitching guy. Okay. So the first year, that was the only way that I was going to get that job was if, I somehow took the pitching role. And, luckily working in 2013 as a volunteer there straight out of college, is that I learned a lot from Brady Wiederhold, who I think he's out of coach. He does a lot of, public speaking now, but, Brady went to 2 World Series. I think he went one with Georgia and he went one with LSU. Okay. He's actually the guy that recruited he was the closer for the Giants for a long time, Brian Wilson
to LSU.
Yeah, so he's the guy that was in charge of Brian Wilson during Brian Wilson's times at LSU, and he said, most of my time was spent there trying to keep Brian Wilson like contained. But ultimately it was his routine and his openness and transparency to his pitchers, so that nothing was ever talked about as, oh, that's a terrible idea. Because it was an open forum. He was the catcher in college. He was a catcher his whole career, and then he turned into a pitching coach. And he's, one of Derek Johnson's close buddies as far as, or last time I think it was, him, Derek Johnson, a couple other really good SEC pitching coaches. I mean, they all, would talk shop and develop a system.
Sure.
But it was just one of those things where he was a big wealth of knowledge in 2013 of trying to pick, how is he doing signs? What's he looking for? How's he doing for this? And ultimately, we just came back down to, well, if I was catching the game and calling the game, I would call it the exact same way if I was the pitching coach calling the game.
Right.
And I'm only ever going off of the strength of the pitcher.
Okay.
And then once the strength of the pitchers identified, then we're going to go after some of the key weaknesses of the hitter if possible. Because you can have the worst hitter in the world and the best pitcher on your staff. Guy make one bad pitch, and this worst hitter hits a bomb and ties the game up. Right? It's just going to happen. But what would you rather do? You'd rather come off the field going, you know what, I made a bad pitch on the pitch I was supposed to make, then why did I shake and go to curveball?
Sure.
Right. And do my secondary pitch. And all of a sudden the guy gets out in front, whack, nice wind blowing out in left field. And all of a sudden we got a 2-2 ball game and we're looking at each other going, well, why didn't we just throw the fastball?
Right.
But anyways, the first thing I do, and I always tell everybody, it's and this is for life and baseball at the same time. The only difference between me and the player is that God put me here before you, right? In timelines of it, is that technically I was born earlier in this whole grand scheme of the human existence than say you, Zach, right? I mean, so when we had hitting talks, like the only difference between me and you at the time is that I've just been around for a couple more years than you have, and hopefully I can get you to have all the issues I've had earlier, so that you don't have to worry about it in your career. And that was the same way I took pitchers. I was like, you know what, hey. Look, I don't know everything about pitching. I don't say I know everything about pitching, but I am going to treat you like I would if I was your catcher.
Right.
And which was really nice because we had a lot of senior pitchers, we had a lot of juniors, a lot of sophomores, and basically it just came up with this plan of, look, we're going to be as transparent as possible. Let's talk about what we're doing, so that when you go out and do it and you have success, you can take the glory because it's your plan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sitting here looking for credit. And
right.
I think that's where we get into an issue with some coaches that they transition into new fields. Is that you can get two different examples. You can get the guy that comes in, right? You can get the guy that comes in is like, oh, I'm the coach, I know everything, and right off the bat, you lose some of the loyalty and some of the willingness of the player to want to even hear what you say, because right off the bat, you put them on a defense because you know everything, I know nothing.
Right.
And that's just how we operate. That's how we think.
Right.
And so if you open up the floor and you say, hey, you're an 18-year-old kid, you've had some experience, what do you think?
Absolutely.
And then before you know it, it's 15 minutes later and they don't shut up.
Right.
And then that's a great thing. That's a great thing to have.
Right. It's a good way of cultivating passion, because the toughest thing for an 18 to 21-year-old dude that's trying to find himself in the world and find his niche and his, be comfortable with his personality, toughest thing for him is to feel like that voice inside is pushed down, is kind of repressed. And I always felt that you were very approachable, despite you, and your approachability did not negate your my respect for you, or the knowledge that you had. And I think that that's an important thing for pitchers, for catchers, for anyone that's working together in a team environment. It's very important. That Greg Golson was on last week. Was talking about a similar thing. He's saying many coaches in my career said that the door's always open. Can always come and talk, which is just a cliche thing that every coach says,
right?
Because they have to say it.
Yeah.
In fact, I find in my career, I've found that I would respect some of my coaches more if they had just been straight up and said, the door is not open, and I don't, and there is not a platform for you to speak. Then I would have been like, all right, okay, I know what to expect, but don't provide that outlet if you're not going to actually sustain it. And I just have to believe that mindset and that approachability, your team at Reinhardt in 18, they weren't the most I don't think they were the most talented. On paper, they weren't
definitely not.
They weren't the number one, ranked team in the South. And again, with people that have an understanding of NAIA college baseball, you have good college baseball in the South in that region. You have Tennessee Wesleyan, you have Lindsey Wilson, you have Georgia Gwinnett. You have big time programs down there. Anyone that if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you go check them out. Go look at where the transfers come from at some of those schools. You'll see SEC schools. You'll see big time college baseball program transfers at NAIA schools that are no less talented. So I'm always impressed, and I'm always obsessed to a point with teams that exceed their potential. I was part of some junior college team that one of my most memorable years back in 14 was at CCBC Essex, where we were not that talented, and we won like 24 games, and the program had won 8 games the previous year. Anyway, those types of stories, that's what kind of reminds me of your 18 run, and you're running 18 going to Lewiston. What was that like? What was it like to make it to the College World Series out there?
Oh, number one, it was, I guess if anybody's ever had the experience of, well, what do I do with my hands? I don't know, like the Ricky Bobby experience. Like I got interviewed by our SID, and I just kept saying, it's a great day for us, right? It's a great day for us. And I think the 2018 team is an island of misfit toys that somehow came together for a team accomplishment. Because mind you, they fired the head coach in April for some misconduct
Right.
that happened in other areas. We don't need to go into it, but it was just at a strike of issues that finally came to fruition. AD pulled the plug. It reached the president's office, and she was like, "You got to do something about it." So, Johnny Boy's given a lot of detail. Johnny's given, for me, I was given a lot of duties with our AD coming in, who was the first original head coach in Reinhardt's history, and he came back to fulfill that role and kind of oversee some day-to-day stuff. But it was one of those things where you had first of all, in April when that all went down, it was like watching a bunch of dogs that have only known captivity touch grass for the first time. Like literally, like they go out, like, you're telling me we can make mistakes now and we can do stuff without getting hammered for, the perfect way of doing it. And it was just, it was so nice because you could finally see the personalities come to be. I think we hit like 500. I think one of our guys hit like 580 in the regional.
Unbelievable.
Right, which just went off.
Yeah.
On paper, we hit like 170 as a team going into the regional. Or no, sorry. 270. Sorry, okay. 270.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little bit more realistic. 270.
Damn.
Yeah, it was really low. I mean, our numbers were really low. Like 270 going into regional, and you're one of the better teams in your area.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, you go in and you basically just kill everybody.
Yeah.
And that was really nice. And the statistics that I like to point out is like, for, strikeouts per 9, we were top 10 in the nation. We knew how to put people away. Right. We didn't have guys throwing 95, 96. We had guys throwing 88 to 92, but we knew how to attack.
Yes.
And what we knew to attack was our goal, which was I'm going to pitch with number 1 first. I'm going to command, and then I'm going to own you by the second pitch in to where now you're on the defensive for pitch number 3. And whenever we did that, we were very successful. Our goal was to get you out in 3 pitches, which was, something that everybody talks about pitching in the independent leagues. It's like, if you want to last, put people away. Don't sit there and try and toy people in counts and win counts and win counts. It's like just put the guy back in the dugout.
Right.
How about that?
Get the guy out of the box. I mean, a lot of organizations are getting wise to get the guy out of the box.
Right.
In 3, maybe 4, but 3, maybe 4 pitches or less. That means if you give up a knock, but get the guy. Now, I mean, not to cut you off there, but there's no way that that's the approach in Major League Baseball with a lot of things.
Well, I mean, you got a whole different story in Major League Baseball. And because I haven't been there, I wouldn't want to speak for it, but it is an entertainment, right? So you're kind of sitting there going, well, what do the fans want to see? And there are a lot of outside sources that I'm sure come into the, clubhouses, or they're talking to players and they're like, hey, if you can make this interesting, I think we'll get more in attendance this year. And, especially for like the argument of whether or not they're juicing the gun, or they didn't juice the gun, or they're juicing the ball, or they're not juicing the ball, right? That argument can be made on both sides for the sake of the fan, right? Because somehow, the guys in AA, and you can talk to them, you can talk to them on your show, you can talk to them in passing. It's like there's a difference between the ball in AA and the ball in Major League Baseball.
100%.
Right? Rawlings is making the same ball. They're weaving it the same way. They're making it in the same factory. But what's the difference, though?
Right.
I would love to know scientifically what the heck's the difference between the AA ball and the Major League ball.
Yeah.
And then, because like I said, I haven't been there. I don't want to speak on that behalf because, I don't know for sure. I just know that when you get there, there's a different goal. Every player has the same goal because they want to stay there. They want to get paid, and they want to last. They want to, hopefully win a championship. If you don't want to do any of those things, then, you're having a fun run, and you may not have experienced it enough to know, well, you really like doing it. You should probably stay there because it's pretty awesome from what I've heard from people.
Right.
But it's just one of those things where, I don't want to ever say too much about Major League Baseball. I think every major industry that makes well over $1 billion a year has their own issues. But at the same time, you're like, is there something that changes in the working of going up to the dream? And then once you get there, that somebody else is telling you, hey, your dream's got to make a little bit of a different move because we need you to make the fans more happier.
Right.
Because if you're a pitcher that's killing everybody, and, like Mariano Rivera, like if you're Mariano Rivera, that one game where you're like, hey, can you blow it this time so that it makes it look like you're human? Right? I don't think that's happening, but at the same time, like, it would, for the entertainment aspect of it, right? It's not fun to watch Goliath kill David all the time.
Right.
Although, it's like, oh, somebody please stop it. This is, this is terrible, right? Every once in a while, you got to go, hey, David, you're going to win this one. Like,
Definitely.
just swing that sucker, let it fly. I guarantee you he falls.
Yeah. And
because that's entertaining.
in independent baseball, I would say there's still a lot of pitchers, like, you just alluded to this, but a lot of pitchers are still, their mindset is not, they want to get out. They want to try to get signed. They want to get, move up to higher levels. And strikeout rate and the
Velocity,
efficacy to which you have to put guys away. It's important, but spoken to a lot of players in my career too, where pitchers are like, I want to throw 7 to 8 innings every night. I want to get to the lineup 3 times. Personally, I think it's a more refreshing brand of baseball, although we still have guys that throw very hard coming out of the pen.
Oh, yeah.
But from a consuming perspective, you have pitching coaches and pitchers that are not just looking at the hitters in a okay, I don't have to just get them out once. I need to know that, and this is something that you mentioned in the past about that 18 team and when you've been pitching coach in college, you instill this idea in guys that it's not just about how do I get this guy out now. It's what can I do now to set him up for the second at-bat and set him up for the third at-bat. And now you're playing pool because every shot sets up the next shot.
Yeah, and like I talked about, it was the nonverbal cues too. So like, the guy's thinking, right? He may not actually be giving you any cues, but as he's walking to the box, there might be a more timid nature, or maybe somebody in the dugout on their end was saying, hey, this guy's attacking with a lot of fastballs. Be aggressive.
Pitch. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So then he comes into the box all gung ho, and then we start him off with a breaker, and he's just like, and he turns around the dugout.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just one of those things where you're not necessarily setting him up as much as you're following through with the plan that works.
Okay.
So for us, and talking with pitchers, and I mean, I love the kids to death. It was, Connor Hawkins, it was, Dylan Powers, and it was Daniel Delinsky.
Mm-hmm.
For our frontline 3. We also had a kid, Jason Gifford, who had nasty cutter, and used it to his advantage, but he was a starter that went the distance. And I told him, I'm like, dude, you got 4 pitches. We can't show all 4 in the first inning.
Right.
Like he would want to shake, he would want to do stuff. And I'm just like, dude, hey, like if we do something, let's mix level more than we're mixing pitches, because you have so much command of that pitch. Like that's easier for you to do. And then later we go, against the lefties, we'll go change up away and fade that sucker down, or we'll start them off and then we'll break them in. And it was just, at that point you start to see the click, because then every once in a while, because we had freedom to shake, and we had a junior catcher and a senior catcher, it was like, because they had freedom to shake, the catchers all knew what the secondary pitch was to go to for that guy.
Right.
And so then you kind of have a 2-way system between me and the catchers of, well, at least if he doesn't want to go with this one, we know we got a good second option. And then if that got smoked, right, then it was like the only conversation was, why did we go away from the strength?
Right. So you're always going back to playing off of the guy's strengths.
And that mindset really was super enforced when I went to indie ball and I was calling my own games, because nobody's teaching you anything. Okay. It was like June 17th. I showed up, and June 16th in 2014, and June 17th I'm catching Nelson Polanco. That name will stick forever in my mind because it's a great name, and he was a great dude. He's a 30-year-old Dominican guy, still working his way through, and made it to the minor leagues. I think AA a couple of times, AAA once, and dude was just nasty. Had this devastating splitter, and I'm calling his game, and I'm just going off of everything I've learned over my course of catching. And I was like, well, if I'm going to call a game, I'm going to call a game to his strength. So now knowing the guy for one day, I've got the warm-up and the bullpen to figure this out. How do I do it? With a guy that speaks some English pretty well, that, if he had a Spanish catcher, would have been way more comfortable.
Right.
So then I just went off the fact that I'm like, okay, well, number one, we're going to attack with his best. And if we do go away from something, I want to figure out what he goes to. So you just open up a line of communication. Hey, if I'm going to shake, or if I'm going to do something, what's the second best that we can go to try and set somebody up?
Sure.
And then, okay, what's your put away? If you had to put somebody away every time, all the time, what's your pitch? So easy questions to ask. And then, the follow-up would be, well, okay, are you okay with setting up the strength by using the secondary early? And, right off the bat, you're like, oh yeah, just, only to righties, not to lefties. So then you're okay, like just a comfort level for him to make sure he's okay. Long story short, he goes 8 innings, he gives up 2 hits, and we win the ball game. And he comes back to me after the game, he goes, I'll never shake you ever. And I was just like,
Trust.
like
Trust right there.
I didn't do anything different.
Right.
I just went off of everything that has ever made success or any sort of pitcher comfortable, and it works. And then as soon as it doesn't work right, if he gave up the one hit in the ninth or whatever, it's like, or the eighth, he's not mad about it because he stuck to the strength and he was okay with it.
And he had conviction in his decision because you weren't enforcing your reality on him. You were allowing him to carry out his own reality and his own plan. And that's for any coaches that are out there listening, for youth coaches, that's what you gain by giving your players freedom. And one of my questions for you was, well, how did independent baseball shape your mindset as a coach and as a baseball guy? There you go. Because we don't always have scouting reports in any ball.
No.
Go out and play the game. And learn from your teammates, get to know your teammates, and boom, you have success right there. And I'm sure that goes a long way in endearing yourself to the rest of the pitching staff, which is critical if your team is going to exceed their potential.
Yeah, and like you were talking about with scouting reports only work if you never miss a spot.
That's right. That's true. That's
like I can't tell you any other way. Like, and I see all these programs doing detailed layouts of scouting reports. They're spending thousands and thousands of dollars on automated scouting reports from a site or whatever. And great, good for you. You have knowledge, right? You have knowledge, but you may not actually get what you want out of it. Or I've seen this a number of times where I was the player. They had a scouting report on me. And then I hear in the post-game interview that my dad forwarded me because it was hilarious, is I smoked a bomb on a 2-2, I think it was a 2-2 fastball in from a relief pitcher from Liberty, I think my junior year.
Okay.
And the interview the guy had, well, the scouting report said, hard in, soft away on Harris. That didn't work.
No.
Right? like, well, no joke, because you missed, number one, you probably missed your spot.
Right.
And number two is the scouting report doesn't always mean everything, because you're usually throwing it away after the first two at-bats.
That's right.
And then what are you left with? You're left with the real knowledge of understanding. Do you know the strength of your player?
Right.
Like, if you know that, and that's like, kids don't want to know what you know. They want to know that you care.
Right.
Right. And you're caring about them enough to know what they know first and then figure out how to then turn it.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell every coach the same thing is it's less about telling them what you know, but more so translating what you know into a way that they will want to know it. Right. So you have to be able to turn it into the language that they're using. Like we talk about this all the time, or we did at least, what are your angles and how do we get proper angles for lift and, launch and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay,
right.
All right. Well, what you call launch now is what we called backspin. Right. I mean, it was just, it's a different way we were focusing on it in the past. To where, what do you have to do in order to create backspin? Your barrel's got to get out in front of the zone. You've got to catch a ball at a certain angle, because otherwise, if you don't, it's going to top spin or knuckle through the infield.
Right.
But ultimately, you're doing the same thing, just with less body angles. You're not really focusing on doing PVC pipe drills. Like, it was one of those things that we had all talked about, but we weren't doing it at the same level that they're doing it now with their body posture. Yeah. So it's just, it's translating, and if you're an assistant coach, I always tell, maybe you're the translator between the player and the head coach.
Yeah.
Right. Because head coaches have their ways, and they're probably older, and they probably all think they know everything to some degree. The assistant coach, you have to do everything that head coach wants, but you have to translate to your players to make your players believe in the system and the process.
Right.
Yeah. And if you can do that effectively, that's great, because you get to keep your job.
Right.
Hopefully, in a perfect world. Because then if you try and implement all your systems as an assistant coach and they don't work, then your head coach gets mad at you and your kids get mad at you.
Right.
Like, you just sometimes just have to be a translator.
Right.
And trying to relay to a certain degree.
It's funny because you mentioned the scouting reports and everything. My father's something he's always said is it's why they make you play the games in person. It's why the games aren't played on paper.
Right. Nick Saban said it great. He was, looking at the media and just go, well, why don't you guys just write the final score?
Well,
everything. Why don't you guys just write the score? I just play.
It's why management and leadership has to happen off of statistical modeling. And we won't get into a political conversation, but that's playing out in all kinds of avenues and arenas right now. But specifically with the stat modeling and with scouting reports, let's transition quickly. So you're at a game. You're
Yeah.
scouting for Reinhardt, or you're scouting
Yeah.
for, any organization. Um, to what extent are you taking this information into account when you're recruiting? And how has everybody in the recruiting process now, all you have to do is go on Twitter, all you have to do is go on social media, and you have players tagging accounts. Here's my exit velocity. Here's my 60 speed.
Right.
Here's my metrics, as if you as a player are just simply reduced to the components of your game.
Yeah.
What do you look for? What is important to you as a recruiter?
I mean, it was something I was taught a long time ago, but if you find the people with more intangibles than tangibles, they will gain tangible items. It's very hard for someone to just base everything off of tangible items and then make that into a leader per se, or someone that's going to benefit your program, right? At some point in his career, Derek Jeter sucked, right? At some point, he wasn't the best shortstop in the league. I don't think he was ever technically the best shortstop in the league physically, but he was always the guy that had the most intangible items that made him one of the only captains to ever exist in the New York Yankee franchise.
It's true.
With that said, how do you find that? You're watching for a lot of things: the camaraderie that person might have in the dugout, what his parents are like, because that's a big one. If you don't like how mom and dad act, you're not going to like how the kid acts.
Right.
Because at some point the apple's not going to fall far from the tree.
Right.
So, and then, it just comes down to the relationships that you might be able to see in that short window of 9 or 7 innings to try and see what kind of relationships he builds, either with the players that are playing the game or the players that aren't playing the game.
Right.
And for me, that was just always easy to tell, because usually, it looks somewhat like, and you do this too, and I know every good baseball player does it. It's like, oh, that guy reminds me of so-and-so.
Right.
Right. And you're linking, hopefully, more about what their mannerisms look like than what they're actually doing on the field.
Yes.
Right. So, you have a guy like, oh man, that little shortstop plays like X time, like that's more of a physical thing. But then you can always go back to former teammates and be like, well, that guy's got a vibe that totally looks like, Johnny Rucker or whatever.
Reminds me of a guy I
you're
played
linking
with.
in your head.
Yes.
Right. Some of those positive elements that you knew what made the guy you're referencing successful. And it had nothing to do with his playability, because everybody at some point, you're going to get a couple of hits. You're going to help a team win. Everybody can do the physical stuff in baseball, right? That's not what gets you from one level to the next. What gets you from one level to the next, really, in my mind, is just, can you be a good person consistently over time and be actually who you say you are, right? The reality of knowing who you are and how to, sell yourself, right? In the independent league, guys will know what I'm talking about. It's like, you're your own representative. There's nobody that's your agent and whatever. You're doing the call, you're doing the calls, you're doing the follow-ups, you're doing the follow-through, but you got to be the person that you say you are. Otherwise, you're back looking for another team in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They don't have time, right? They don't have time to put up with BS at a $600 paycheck a month.
That's right. And I mean, I've always said minor league baseball players, and especially independently baseball players, no one understands being a small business or being a startup. You are a startup as a minor league baseball player.
Right.
It is on you to do your marketing, to do your quality control. You're doing all the same things that businesses do in a very, finite and particular window of space and time. I love what you bring up when you talk about the X time, making player comps. You're a big music guy. I'm a big music guy. I see guitars in on the Zoom video. I can see the guitar right there.
Yeah.
It's no different than you talk to musicians. They'll always talk about their influences. They'll always talk about who they listen to. And you hear that play out in the music sometimes. And it makes it interesting because there's this connection between the past and the present. You have the history, you have the future. And you've been around so much baseball. You've been around so many kids, so many different programs. Our kids these days, despite their connection to technology and their ability to tap into info, have they lost that appreciation for history? Have they lost that appreciation for players in the past and their influences? I'll let you speak on that.
I wouldn't say that it's solely on the kid, because the parent comes into that too. and it becomes the relationship between parent and kid is so influential because like I know right off the bat, if I have a great family system, like I love, the best thing about coaching in college is starting to see what you're doing for the family when you bring someone on. It's not about what you're doing for the kid, right? Because if you get the phone, like Chris Basilio is one of my favorite players at Reinhardt. Left fielder, came in as a pitcher, busted his arm, turned into an outfielder, was leading the league this year in like bombs for for our conference before everything coronavirus went down.
Yeah.
He was a really good offensive player, just always struggled with different things at different times. But like, Lord, his mom still calls me.
Yeah.
Like, and she, she's so sweet, so nice. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm so happy that, we can make Chris into something that Chris was happy with, but ultimately what his mom was happy with. And the same thing goes when, you give somebody a shot. Maybe it's an all academic kid.
Yeah.
However, getting back to the question, I think we lose sight because the relationship in the house might be breaking down a little bit more now than it's been because kids are so locked in to some degree. And that's where I go back to, I'm more focused on the relationship aspect of an individual and how they're able to operate with other people. Because that will show whether or not it's the popular kid that only is interested in what text messages he's getting,
right,
than actually building the face-to-face relationships with the people he actually enjoys being around.
Yeah.
It's like you and I, we had high school situations and college situations where people are so fake, like, can we just be real for 5 seconds and enjoy the time with a certain select few, a group of people instead of trying to be this, I have, Instagram followers. And I'm like, dude, you're 16 years old.
Yeah.
Be 16.
Yeah.
Right. You'll have time to be, Joe Blow, Jersey Shore, Mike the Situation type guy on Instagram. Like just be a kid.
Well, and that's that same element of the culture of look how many, let me go on social media, look how many college offers I have. This college is interested. This college is interested. Yeah, man, guess what? You get to go to one, unless you're like me and you bounce around to like 5 schools or whatever, but you pretty much, when you make the decision, you are picking one school. So
you're hoping, right? Because sometimes the situation doesn't really.
The same people, look how many friends I have. I have all these friends. I have all this social clout. It's like, well, you have people that actually are in your corner and actually are invested in you. But
and that's tough to figure out. And I think going back on the history of the game, I think we are losing stuff because I remember asking kids, I'm like, okay, hey, Tony Gwynn, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, who? And I'm like, you're left-handed, you're an outfielder, and you don't know who Tony Gwynn is.
That's not even. That to me, that's not
just
that long ago. It'd be like Willie McCovey, and people are like, "Who? Is that the guy?"
Yeah.
Is that the guy?
I mean, now granted, you go back that far. Yeah. You go back that far, people. Yeah. Yeah, it's because they didn't have 20 million Instagram followers that they don't know who they are. Like I find it funny. I think. Guys like Jordan Schaefer, I think has a really good following on social media. Former outfielder for the Braves.
Yeah.
I mean, seems like a great guy, but it's just funny how people will follow that type of individual that really doesn't do a whole lot for the game, and there's nothing really, there's nothing great about him as a player. He's a good player, made it to the big leagues, great for him. I just think there's a lot of other people that I think are losing out when they forget about the history of the sport and they forget about the history. Because, you can go, wow, my swing kind of resembles that. What was he doing back then with no information or technology that's still leading to guys with that same swing? And I'm like, it's the game constantly recreates people that make it better.
Right.
And just over time.
It's that reverence for those that can't. When you play long enough, you understand how at a certain level you step back and you're lucky, you're blessed and lucky enough to just be part of this fabric that has maintained tradition. And we're all for innovation and for using new resources if they're available, but it's all a means to an end of being part of that fabric, that social fabric, that community fabric. It's the same thing with music. It's the same thing with art. It's linking people in different places together. And that's why history is important, in my opinion. Do you think that the academy, again, you've done a lot of stuff with prep baseball and with, the recruiting scene and online recruiting programs and everything. To what effect is that being lost because of the way that the academy models are now run? Players, well, you talk about
Yeah.
youth baseball and amateur
Right.
baseball.
So when you talk about youth baseball, I mean, here it starts early because East Cobb travel ball starts like age 8, apparently.
Yeah. Up here now too, everybody's got an 8U team, a 7U team. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I just hate the fact that I've heard so many stories, and our family's somewhat similar because I was my older brother's 4 years older than I am. He didn't play sports in college. I was the first one to start playing sports in college, and then my younger brother played a couple of years at SCAD before they got rid of their program.
Yep.
And for all of us, it was one of those things where, like, man, I can't think of a vacation we had during high school that wasn't centered around a baseball tournament.
Yep, that's right.
Right. And so, I mean, looking back now, I keep thinking about, like, well, I don't ever want to say that to my wife for our kid. I'm like, okay, like, we're going to shut down for a little bit. Like, let's just cut everything off to a certain degree until he says, hey, I really want to get serious with this. I don't think I'm really going to force my hand and saying, hey, well, you have to play 12U travel or else the rest of your career is tarnished.
Right.
I don't think I started playing travel ball until I was 13. And that was only so that we could get the right kids together. We could pick our rosters. We could have the group that we wanted to play with without worrying about a lottery system with a public system, a public sport park or whatever. Yeah. So it's just one of those things where, like, the systems and I'm still friends with a number of kids that are on that original 13U roster.
Yep.
Like, like, our families are all close knit friends still. It's just really funny how that works out.
Yeah.
If you do it for the right reason.
Right.
I think nowadays when you look at travel baseball and its early set, you put a monetary value on the individual right off the bat. Like, we're talking 8-year-old kids now have a monetary value attached to their name.
Yep.
To me, that's, child labor. I mean, but nobody's technically paying the kid, right?
Yeah.
But you are getting a lot out of it. East Cobb makes a ton of money on tournaments by, saying, hey, take your 8-year-old kid, subject them to all these hours of play, and compete on a level that isn't, necessarily built for that age.
Yeah.
And like in the Northeast, like, they're leading off and doing all this stuff at age 10. And I'm like, that's too early.
Yeah.
These kids have no clue how to play the game, and you're going to start throwing things at them that they're not ready for.
We have club organizations in our area in New Jersey that advertise, that pride themselves that we offer 55-game schedules for your 9 and 10-year-olds. I'm like, listen, my parents used to make me and my brother go to the beach. We were told, you can't go to that tournament in August. You can't do that. At a certain point, I think I was like 13, 14. Yeah. I was like pushing them. I was like, I want to play. I don't want to go on vacation. I want to play. I want to play baseball.
Yeah.
So that's a different situation. But 55-game schedules for 8, 9
for a 9 or 10-year-old.
And you think your child's not going to be burnt the hell out by the time they're 14, which is when I have people come to me all the time. They're 13, they're 14. They're like, they're rattling off stats and information from their 13-year-old, 14-year-old leagues. And you have to tell them at a certain point, like, guys, I care about you and your player. I prioritize you guys, and I want him to grow, but I care about his development. I don't really care if he gets 400 as a 14-year-old. It doesn't tell me very much, So it's
and you definitely don't want to max out at age 14 either. We used to see a bunch of kids, you play with them, I played with them. It's like, the best kid in the league at age 14 was not the best kid in the league at age 18. I'll tell you that right
They're
now.
done. They're not even playing at age 18 anymore.
Right. It's just unfortunate. And, but at the same time, I think you have to have real conversation. And this is where I was talking about the family. It's like, if the family's well knit to a degree where conversations are happening that are beneficial for both the parent and the kid, is that you have to somewhat open it up and say, hey, do you want to take a year off? Because number one, you're going to figure out whether or not the kid's passionate about the sport or not.
It's true.
That's a good test. And then also, do multiple sports, because then you're figuring out, well, what do they like the most? What benefits them and what benefits their skill set. I used to love the fact that I played high school football for a long time. And there's a different mindset between high school football players that end up being college baseball players versus the baseball players in college that never touched football.
That's true.
Just in my mind, there's
That's
a different
true.
mindset, and there's different things that they can coexist. And, there are different ways of looking at everything, like, especially like a toughness ability where, you get hit by a ball. It's like, that's nothing. I'd rather get hit by a ball at 90 miles an hour than a 240 pounder, running across the middle on a blind side. Like, no, thank you.
It's even better up here with like hockey players. You see that England and then like Chicago and
Yeah.
upper Midwest, the hockey mentality with
Oh
baseball,
yeah.
it's refreshing because I think, especially when you see guys struggle for periods and they go through slumps. I don't know. Hockey players have a unique way of dealing with that.
Yeah.
But I 100%. Plus, with multiple sport athletes, I think what you're saying is guys are if they truly love baseball, they're able to appreciate why they like baseball,
Right.
or why they like or if it's
Right.
soccer or another sport, why they like that sport.
Right. Yeah. You develop an articulate ability to understand why.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then, maybe if you can't articulate it verbally, you're just like, I don't know. I get excited when I get on that ball field, and it's different than when I go to the gym and play basketball. Right.
Yes.
It's just, I'm not as adamant about a basketball court as I am a baseball field. And then, I'd say, but yeah, it just comes back to, I think, we're somewhat exposing, like, as if this is the plan that they have to do. Otherwise their future is at jeopardy. And I'm like, there's a lot of kids that are getting picked up in the Midwest, a lot of guys that are getting drafted that are only playing high school sports.
Yeah, they're not even they're not even going to the club tournaments. They're not even
So
necessarily.
So you're telling me there should be an outlier that basically says every kid that only plays high school sports should never be drafted. But that's not the case, because good athletes find all sorts of different forums to work with what works for them.
Right.
And you don't have to necessarily subject the kid to 55 games. On my instance here, because we're playing 25 to 30 games in the high school season, if you're going to do a summer, I'd max it out at 40, because even then, to me, for a high school kid, that's a lot of games. And especially if they wanted to play football in the fall, there's no way for you to do your summer training.
Right, and they need to get their bodies right. Yeah.
Right. So, essentially you have to find a way to multitask physically, and kind of put yourself through the ringer of what you think you can or can't, take as far as that workload goes. And for me, some of those kids, like, the development's not even there for most of them. They may not have a really good strength program associated with the school that they're working with, or for the program they're working with, because that's another financial burden that they might have to do. You do a gym membership and whatnot. You're just like, okay, that's just overkill. If we can, let's strengthen the body so it resists the temptation to break down.
Right.
And then enforce the habits that you want to enforce without overdoing any sort of the burnout. So
it's one of the many things I found was good about junior college. One of the many good qualities about junior college is that it opens you up to an additional cross-section of a demographic, that you have people from lower income, middle income, wealthy incomes, all potentially choosing for different reasons, ending up at that junior college. And as a person, you want to be able to be exposed to different types of people and different perspectives, as opposed to staying in that bubble. And I to my opinion, with the club circuits and the teams and the teams going to East Cobb and going to Fort Myers and whatnot, you have this increase, like this very specific type of demographic that you're now seeing, where it's all the same type of dude with the same type of background. And that's not good for the game. That's not good for players and their development. So it's not to say that playing baseball more is a bad thing. We're not saying that at all. But what we have a little bit of time left. What's the solution? Because that's pricing a lot of people out of baseball. So do you think there is a solution? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, I guess you'd kind of have to look at how each individual organization is kind of doing their books.
Okay.
But even those, you can kind of get shady.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about, not to get too political, but right, how do you get a 36-year congressman or woman that makes $35,000 a year, but their net worth's over $2 million or $15 million.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, you're listed as a not-for-profit for a reason, is so you can pay what you want, and you can pay the people that you want without having to file a tax code. And that's not necessarily a problem with the people. I've made this argument before. It's a problem with tax code, right? So if East Cobb, if Gary Baldwin's a millionaire, that's not Gary Baldwin's fault.
Right.
That's the tax code's fault for allowing him to work the system that way, because he's making money off your kids and then taking the glory on one of those driven, Fox Sports Net driven. I think it was like a show that ran like 30 minutes, I think twice or something like that. And he's, talking about all his claim to fame for player development. I'm like, I played for you for like a year and a half, dude. And not once did you ever intend to even exist in my player development.
Right.
I'm just curious how anybody else in the major leagues that came through your program are even going to open up and say, yeah, Gary Baldwin really didn't do that whole much. He gave me a forum to do it. But as far as like my overall development, it was all the other coaches on his staff that were, way more influential. Like I said, Dennis Jordan, Davis May, Chance Beam, like you have Danny Prago now runs 643. It's like all those dudes were in that bubble and no longer are associated with East Cobb, and you'll wonder why.
Okay.
Right. So all of them now have different branches of different programs. I think Dennis still does a little bit of stuff here and there, but it's like the proof was in the pudding of years after that whole thing kind of went down. It's like, okay, well, there's a reason that all these guys are leaving is because the thing that Gary's talking about never happens.
Right.
And then, like I said, there's just a whole lot going on in different assets. And I'd say the solution would be find it at the source. Really look at where people are putting their money, just like you would anything. I would hope somebody pays for a service and actually knows where that money's going.
Right.
Because if you're going to donate money to the American Red Cross, I would hope the American Red Cross is doing with your money what they're saying they're doing with your money.
Right.
So if you're paying a $3,000 fee to play for the year, ask for the books. Like, hey, we're only really interested if, can you show me your books and tell me how you're going to use our money and make sure that it's going to the right place so that you're not, going to strip clubs and whatnot on the dime of the kid. Right?
Yeah.
Wink, wink, hit, it happens, right? People, do stupid things with other people's money when they're not supposed to use that money. And I just feel bad because sometimes you get locked into it too. And it's like, okay, are you really doing what you want to do? And are you really doing what's right with the money that you're getting in from the program? It's just sad because sometimes it happens. Right. But like not, definitely not something that I think needs to be like super looked at. But if you are going to make a correct decision and try to make sure you're not, like what you're talking about, you're pricing out certain groups.
Right.
Like, I think there's a way to do somewhat of a scholarship program within those individual programs. Something similar to that. I think there are a lot of programs that do have a good way, or they do a payment plan and everything's up front. You make it, like I said, with being transparent. Like if you have a parent meeting, whatever, you don't want to single out the parent that's having a rough time, but you do want to say, look, hey, in order for us to make this work with the players that we think are going to benefit the system, we have to pay this. And then also it allows for other people to have certain, programs that are eventually going to pay this amount. You have to do it in a correct way that doesn't single people out and that doesn't discriminate in a way that I guess makes people feel somewhat uncomfortable with it.
Right.
In general, I think people around here are starting to do more programs. I think Marquise Grissom has a program down here. He and his brother are doing a really good job down here of trying to do more with inner city kids and trying to do more with, different things like that. I try as hard as I can not to, I guess, see color for what it is, but it's also something that you see every day. And I had a conversation with a guy about how I recruited at Reinhardt. I'm like, I want the best kid that I know is going to get in the system. I could care less what he looks like.
Right.
We got Hunchback, we got something crazy, but the guy's dropping tanks, right? I mean, I got to have the guy. Right. If he's going to make my program better, I'm not trying to single anybody out. I'm trying to make it work for them to make it realistic for them to get a great education. And that includes if it's a summer league, you're hoping that they're benefiting for some sort of baseball education.
Yes.
And then move on to an educational platform that will hopefully let them pay for an education they would have otherwise not been able to get if it wasn't for the sport. So, I wouldn't necessarily want to, I think we were talking about singling out for a summer specific travel organization, but colleges are doing the exact same thing. But it's not the coach's fault. It's the administration system of how they're doing admissions. And so you can get systems that will benefit, the Joe Blow kind of, great academic kid that may be a lower income. There's a lot more programs for that kid that are also associated with the low income than there are for the same kid that had income.
Right.
There's so there's a lot of systems in play where, not everybody's getting the fair shake. Because not all money is working for all demographics at the same time. It's that you have different parameters and different things that they lock into. So it just, I think the administration side for admissions for some colleges have to ask themselves the same question. Is like, are you doing, equal opportunity? It doesn't have to necessarily be equal outcome, but we should at some point hope that the equal opportunity will sort out equal outcome. Because if you try and overcome with the equal outcome, you'll always, screw up the system. It's like, you can't make these two situations the same because they're never going to be the same.
Right. And I think it's for
that's where I'm at.
Right. For parents, you're cutting out there a little bit, but for parents that are listening to, I think it's important to understand that the coaches you entrust your players with and the programs you want to go to, they have to have this global vision for your children or for your players. And if you can't access that, or if that can't be explained in the initial sales process or the advertising process, why are you paying thousands of dollars for their kid to go play in a tournament? In New Jersey, in the Northeast in particular, we used to have Legion Baseball. Legion Baseball, when my brother was playing, this was back in early 2000s. One of the pride, it was a big source of pride for the state.
Yeah.
And you had multiple towns supplying players for one Legion team. So it was very much an all-star team of sorts for high school-age guys. They played with wood bats. They had a big deal about making the state tournament, making the national tournament, regionals, et cetera.
Yep.
And then a few years back, what happened was the Legion team started to splinter into being associated with particular high schools. And then each high school had a summer Legion team. Well, it's about developing our players in-house. Okay, that's one thing. But then that kind of turned into, well, we just privatize it. And then all of a sudden, you have high school teams associated specifically with club teams. And that happens everywhere. People don't want to put high school coaches aren't allowed to necessarily work directly with kids in the off season.
Right.
So they get a buddy to do it. They get someone else to do it. And all you're doing is basically forcing players within that organization to decide if they're 8, 9, 10 years old, do you want to play? Listen, your son better play for us, because if he has any interest in playing varsity baseball at our high school, better be involved in our club program.
Right. Yeah.
Ludicrous. That didn't used to be the case. So
no, I think now we find ourselves in this situation. And this last couple of months have kind of showcased that. It's like we're criminalizing legal activity.
Yeah, we are.
So if you want to change the rules, and this goes at all levels, this starts at the NCAA and works its way down, is that if you want to make so many rules to where now you're forcing people to do back channel shady deals so that they could do the things that aren't illegal, right? Because there's nothing wrong with Harbaugh at Michigan doing a satellite facility thing. Right. There's nothing wrong with that. He doesn't want to make somebody travel all the way up to Michigan, pay for it, do all this other. He can just make it easier by saying, hey, I'm doing a camp. I'd like to create a partnership. Yep. Hey, we'll split it 50-50. I'm only paying for my travel at that point. By the way, that's a smaller carbon footprint. Right. If you really want to get technical, it's a smaller carbon footprint. As opposed to travel versus all those people traveling. Exactly. Yeah. So in the reverse, the NCAA is saying, okay, well, we're okay now with having 500 kids fly to Michigan. Yeah. On maybe 500 different other planes. And now we're like, okay, well, what's the argument for the carbon footprint if you're not looking at it at the start for your rules, number one. But I'm not a big carbon footprint guy. I'm just making the argument for some people that might be, that to get you to rethink, look at the legislation you might already be doing on one side of it, and then just apply it to the crap that you're trying to do with these coaches. Like, they don't have 36 hours a day. They have the same 24 that we all do. Right. But you're going to force them to make decisions that nobody would be able to make in 24 hours. Right. Absolutely. So it gets frustrating there. And then what we were talking about with, kind of criminalizing legal activity, and this goes at all levels. It's like, the kid's not doing anything wrong. Yeah. Nobody's doing anything wrong. Yeah. But now what you're doing is you're forcing the hand to say, well, if you don't, then you're doing something against my wishes. Yes. Right. And that's just unfortunate that's the case. And for me, I always say, power of the feet, people. Move, go to a different school, go find, I know it's tough to do for certain people to move to different districts and whatnot, but if you know about your high school scenario or the college scenario before you sign on enough to make a decision to move your feet, because that's much easier to do than to try and move the person that's unchangeable. Yeah. And it's very easy for people to go on social media today and say, well, the cream is always going to rise, the best of the best. Well, yeah. Not necessarily in a broken system where high schools are making players pay to play from an early age, and now money is involved,
And now the whole objective system of measuring is kind of thrown out the window. And that's why a lot of these measurements are good, because now if a guy's got a 95-mile-an-hour exit velocity, or he throws 93 miles an hour, even if he isn't involved in the club program embedded with the school, he can now say, you know what? I have all these objective tools. If this guy doesn't, like, clearly there's something that you're missing here because I got cut or I'm on JV or this, that, and the other. So to that extent, I appreciate why the objective measurements, they can be an arsenal for a player. They can be a resource. We got time for one more question, and you've already kind of touched on it, but obviously I opened up today. I was talking about Bowling Green. I was talking about Furman. I don't think that they're going to be the last two schools to cut baseball right now. I really don't. The landscape of sports is constantly shifting, and right now we're in a period of turmoil, the likes of which we haven't seen. What is going to happen? What's the solution here? I mean, there are jobs being Bowling Green. We talk about alums like Oral Hershiser, Roger McDowell. We have big time. There's some stat floating around that like 4 or 5 of the final outs of the World Series, and like 4 or 5 different World Series
are all coming from the same.
Were recorded by pitchers who played at Bowling Green. Furman, I mean, closer to where you're at, and up in Greenville, and down towards Atlanta.
Yep.
Great facility, good program. We play there a bunch. Always some hard-nosed guys, and a great facility. It's a shame, and I think that a lot of athletic departments are going to use, or colleges are using this excuse to eliminate budget deficits brought on by baseball and softball. So what is wrong, man? What's going on with the system right now?
Yeah, well, first of all, I guess it's unfortunate because my first collegiate start was actually at Furman.
Okay.
So, hit home kind of hard because you're like, man, it's such a good program. I guess the first question I have for anybody who's deciding to, maybe challenge some of this if possible is, why is it that the program that allows for the most on roster with the least amount of scholarship dollar being cut?
Right.
So you have 35 kids on roster max. Now it's going to be more because of the buffer system for 2020, but you have 35 kids on roster at 11.7 scholarship. Right? That doesn't happen for basketball, and that doesn't happen for football, right? The ratio does not support anything other than baseball as the lowest common denominator for a full, if you have the full scholarships. Now, granted, anybody's going to argue, well, what about swimming and tennis and golf that don't have, really any scholarship? I'm like, okay, those are kind of the more outliers of the system because they're high income families that usually play those 3 sports.
True.
Generally when it's NCAA sport division I. So you don't really have a problem budgeting, but it's a question of, why is it that you're cutting 11.7 when you could just cut a football program and eliminate 86 scholarships if you're trying to save money, right? You're trying to save money. But no, baseball players are a majority of baseball players on a roster are pushing back into that college system. I just don't see the
they're reinvesting money back. Their tuition money that they're paying a good chunk of is funding a lot of the program. They're self-sufficient in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah. So, good example is how am I a 75% scholarship athlete for my 4 years at Gardner-Webb, and I still have over $75,000 of student loans? Well, number one is because of high tuition. Number two is because I'm paying a lot still for my education, and that's something that baseball players end up doing. We end up paying a whole lot toward our education. And I just feel bad that the situation has arisen where they're going to justify cutting a program for something that has a 97% success rate if you get it, or 98%.
That's a shame.
I think if anything, they were probably on the bubble to start, and then this happened, and it was like, well, we were going to cut it anyways.
Exactly.
But I don't know either scenario. I'm just saying, as a looking at it, objectively from an outside perspective, it's just unfortunate. And then I've made a couple of comments to some people in our baseball community here. I'm like, this is a great opportunity for junior college programs to come back if they'd closed in the last couple of years.
100%.
It's
100%.
like, hey, here's your opportunity. You're going to get some high school freshmen that don't want to play in a program that has 75 kids on roster now legally. And, I think it was dumb for a lot of our schools to remove their programs, because there's a lot of JUCO talent here, especially in the state system of Georgia, where you benefit by staying in the state, when you close a junior college program, you're influencing people to go out of state. So
That's right.
it's just unfortunate. And then I think, they're not going to be the last ones to do it. And I think we all know what happens when this sort of scenario happens. They come back better than ever. Look at UCLA when they start, the Bruins, when they were said they are going to close, and all of a sudden everybody goes, no, they're not. We're going to fund it higher than ever.
Right.
And they're going to go to a World Series. And that's what they end up doing.
Right.
I think that's the same thing that's going to happen at these smaller programs, is that you're going to see a larger backing of people that haven't maybe made their presence known for a while, that are going to advocate for saying, you know what, we're not standing for this.
Yes.
And if you're going to do it, you're going to release why you're doing it.
And you're already starting to see that at Bowling Green, because I think they've raised something like $400,000 thus far this week, like very, very immediate, big time funding. No, I think people need to be asking questions, and I know they are, but why is the Furman athletics director tweeting 16 days prior to cutting the program? Why is he tweeting something Coach Harker doing such a great job supporting the program? Program did a great job this year. Then 16 days later, that program is cut. It's, again, people who are listening, if you're still listening at this point, the biggest losers are the communities, because people that grew up in Greenville, they grew up in the upstate, they want to go watch college baseball. Kids, boys, they want to watch guys that they are trying to aspire to be. They want to see the game up close. They want to have accessibility. When you remove that, and keep in mind, colleges, a lot of these colleges, Bowling Green might be different. I don't know I don't know the numbers on it. I know it's a state school in Ohio. I don't know what their endowment is, but do you understand what the endowments are for these schools? You understand how much discretionary revenue they have, and they can't. The first people that they hurt are the student athletes. Without a doubt, those are the first people that are hurt by it and impacted by this. They are not necessarily going out of their way to ensure that the student athlete is prioritized. And as consumers and as fans and as people that watch college athletics, it starts and ends with us, because as people that support athletics, and they watch. I mean, you yourself said, you didn't like the way that Gardner Webb treated Rusty. So if they're calling you and they're asking for money, I don't know. You might not get it.
Yeah, it's not happening.
It starts and ends with people letting organizations, letting administrations know, like, no, that's not okay. You're not going to do that. You're not going to cut opportunities away from kids that work hard. And people deserve more transparency than that. So I hope that this doesn't happen to more college programs, but inevitably I think it will. And, as we're all told to stay at home and look at the screens and watch the screens and remove yourself from what's going on outside, we need more outlets, and we need more people to have a place to play and a place to experience baseball. So, Johnny, always a pleasure, man. It's been too long actually since we had a good session, man. But
anytime you want to come down to Georgia, and experience some freedom, let me know.
It's a good point. It might be sooner rather than later if we can't get this thing open pretty soon up here. I was gonna say, I don't know. I'm in dire need of a haircut. You look like you're a little better groomed down there. So
I let it go for about a week, but at the same time, however much I have left, I'm trying to work to the best of my ability.
Well, up here, we haven't had such luxuries, and I don't think we will for some time. So we might have to take matters into our own hands up here. But
you know what? Maybe you let it go. Maybe you see maybe you see what it looks like. Go Captain Caveman for a year and see how it works out.
You had some flow for a while. You see a little long hair, don't care type of thing. So we'll.
That was an experience, but I wouldn't necessarily want to go back to it. But
it's awesome, man. Well, no, as usual, it's always a pleasure, like I said, and we'll put Johnny's social media up and his information up online, so you guys can follow along his journey and his career and everything. And
full disclosure though, I'm no longer on Twitter, so watch out. If anybody's trying to hit me up on Twitter, it's not going to happen.
Okay, we'll make sure everything's up and current and everything.
Yeah, like I said, anybody having an issue with like any sort of mental stuff, I think the two people I would always link, number one, baseball minded guy, Steve Springer. Go find him. What is he? QualityAtBats.com.
Yes.
I don't think you're going to hear a better wealth of knowledge of hitting there, as far as for somebody that has more of a vibe mindset of, some of the things that I took with me in my later career. And then just on a personal note, if anybody's got, the time to read, obviously, if you're in a situation where you're stuck at home, I always tell people, hit up some Jordan B. Peterson, change your mind, change your life kind of stuff. So it's always nice to hear psychologists that understand how life actually works instead of what they want you to think it looks like or how they want it to be, because that's not how it works. So I think he's got a book out that's really nice. So there, and then I'm trying to think of who else is really good to listen to for anybody that has time to really start and rethink their processing. And right now I'm just kind of drawing a blank, but like I said, if anybody wants to reach out, you've got my information, and
Absolutely.
if you want to post the cell phone number, it might even be crazy, but if somebody wants to reach out the cell phone number, call, get some advice or whatever, it's
absolutely
totally fine. I'm open ears. My door's wide open.
That's right. My door is always open. Yeah, that's right.
My door's wide open between the hours of 2 and 3 on Thursday. Okay, so
that's right.
That's pretty much it. Any other time, you're going to go straight to voicemail, but it's okay.
That's right. Awesome. Well, thanks again, man.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks.
To everyone out there, enjoy the holiday weekend. Enjoy what Memorial Day is all about. Hope everyone's staying safe out there. That's right, America. Yeah. And for those that might be struggling with still being stuck inside and whatnot, keep the faith, keep your routines, and let us know if we can help you in any way. Check us out at Rax Hacks. Check out American Batsmith, and enjoy the holiday safely. And we will see you guys again next week. All right.